there's a fourth trial which came later but which supports the position, and this was by Jason et al. Was published in 2007, and they actually compared CBT GET with an alternative which included pacing and helping patients to understand their illness, to help them cope better, and didn't require them to change their beliefs about etiology, and certainly not if they were reasonable, as they usually are. They found that the alternative was better than CBT, but for physical functioning, using the well-known MOS score, there were improvements of 18.2% in the CBT group, in other words, not a huge improvement, 30.4% for the alternative, 11% for aerobic activity, and 21% for relaxation. They've looked at it in other ways, and on the whole, the alternative are at least as good as, and often superior on various outcome measures, to cognitive behavior therapy and graded exercise. And so the position that the BPS took in their submission is supported by this new evidence. Another error was, as I mentioned before, pacing. They really didn't understand the concept, and they rejected a position paper from the BPS, which was unfortunate. Let me read to you what they should have written about the envelope theory. The envelope theory, and this comes from the person who developed it, recommends that patients with ME/CFS pace their activity according to their available energy resources. In this approach, the phrase "staying within the envelope" is used to designate a comfortable range of energy expenditure in which an individual avoids both overexertion and underexertion, maintaining an optimal level of activity over time. Some people with ME/CFS need to be encouraged to increase their activity as they have the appropriate amount of perceived energy to do so. However, there are also people with ME/CFS that need to be encouraged to do less in order to decrease the discrepancy between perceived and expended energy. Now, they didn't understand this, and they therefore rejected it. In a nutshell, what it means is that you do as much as you are physically capable of doing at a time. The difference between pacing and graded exercise is not what you do or when you do it, but when you stop. And Woolman et al. Explained this very well. They had a graded exercise program, but the patients were allowed to stop their activity if they felt unwell. And that actually made it an RCT on pacing rather than graded exercise therapy as they conceptualized it. The other graded exercise therapies do not permit you, or they discourage patients from stopping when they begin to feel unwell. The idea is that the symptoms are caused by a lack of fitness. So you have a sort of Jane Fonda advice: no pain, no gain. Try and maintain your schedule so you become fitter. And in pacing, we don't know what causes the symptoms, so we have a precautionary principle. We believe fatigue may reflect the body signaling that something is wrong, and certainly you should temporarily stop at least. So Woolman is an additional study which supports an alternative approach. We have subsets which were not catered for. We have factual errors which were not corrected. There were omissions. Another interesting omission was the study by Ridsdale et al., which showed that counselling is as good as CBT but cheaper, and you'd think that they would have included that. It was included in the 2001 review. It wasn't included in the NICE review, And apparently that was because it was a mixed population. It included people with CFS as well people who didn't meet the criteria. However, it still did include patients with CFS. And on page 22, if people would like to study the paper from 2001, the whole CFS group, 37, and counselling 20, CBT 17. So you have individual analysis of the scores, and really there wasn't a significant difference between CBT and counselling on a number of measures. I can almost understand why they might have taken the view that they were going to focus on CFS and exclude studies which also included patients with idiopathic chronic fatigue, except they included a study with patients with idiopathic chronic fatigue, and indeed it had a high validity score, and that was the Princetal study. And we alerted them to the letter in the Lancet, and they ignored that. Again, you have a rule which seems to favour CBT and doesn't favour other useful interventions like counselling. And then you have this problem of activity management for which there is no obvious evidence, which then is included. We have the rejection of pacing, for which there are now 3 or 4 different studies. We have the new evidence which shows that certain subsets do well with certain types of treatment and don't do well with other types of treatment. You need to divide patients according to their level of endocrinological damage. So if people have evidence, say, of abnormal cortisol levels, they will need more than CBT and GET. Similarly, if there is evidence of immune abnormalities, you will need to be careful, and CBT alone will not be enough, and this has been published. So to summarize, we have reservations about the accuracy and reliability of the guidelines based on the factual errors which remained uncorrected, the omission of significant studies, and the misunderstanding of important concepts such as pacing.